Hello, everybody. Welcome to the People of Nature podcast. Today, we have a very different profile of speaker here, and the first time we are welcoming an environment lawyer to our podcast. So, let us welcome Maitreya Ghorpade, an
Thank you.
environmental lawyer.
Thank you so much, sir. There are actually not many environmental lawyers, so it's not surprising that you have not had one before. But I'm very grateful for being invited, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yes, you are right. Not many environment lawyers around, so it took some time for even us to find. So, I will just briefly introduce our listeners to Maitreya's work, and I will give you a brief introduction to his work. So, Maitreya Prithviraj Ghorpade is a graduate from Hidayatullah National Law University, having received BA LLB with honors in Indian Constitutional Law and Comparative Criminal Law. Since graduating in 2019, Maitreya has been actively involved in environment litigation, mainly with the National Green Tribunal, in addition to different involvements in litigation before other constitutional courts in India. As an independent environmental law practitioner, he has been involved in pro-conservation litigation on diverse issues like restoration of degraded environment, compensation for illegal mining, thermal power regulation, conservation of urban ecology, unauthorized forest diversion action, and action against air water pollution, coastal zone encroachment, and many such issues. He has also helped in public interest petitions and appeals before constitutional courts, including the topmost court in India, which is the Supreme Court. In addition to being a litigator, he also serves as a client consultant, legal research, drafting pleas, and also oral argumentation. He has been involved in various socio-environmental NGOs in executing projects like Land Conflict Watch, which tracks natural resource disputes across India. He has researched and reported over 20 conflicts across Maharashtra and Goa involving renewable projects, urban public infrastructure, and private development projects. He is also part of various association bodies in HNLU, like Student Bar Association and Constitutional Draft Committee. So, as you can see, Maitreya has a very wide-ranging expertise in environmental litigation, and he has worked on many diverse issues which trouble our ecosystems and communities today. So I will start with the first question, Maitreya. So environmental law is a very specific field, even in law. Was there a specific case or moment of inspiration which sparked this passion in environmental law?
Uh, See, I wouldn't say that there is a specific moment. I feel like my upbringing played a big part in me ultimately landing up at this particular profession. But it wasn't a direct path that I took, in the sense that in college, I would intern at various different kinds of law offices. So I have done internships at the district court in Pune. I've done internships at the High Court in Mumbai. I've done internships at the Supreme Court. I've done internships with criminal lawyers, with civil lawyers, with corporate offices, with policy think tanks. I did internships pretty much everywhere that I could. Because I was curious to see what all various kinds of practices are there of the same field of law. So, in doing so, I realized that all of these that I just listed, civil law, corporate law, criminal law, high court law, Supreme Court law, it has some factors which are interesting to me, but on the whole, it's not something I can do on a long-term basis. It's something I realized in college itself. And then, as luck would have it, I got an internship at a very well-known environmental lawyer in Pune, whose name is Advocate Asim Sarode, who was at one point the president of the NGT, the National Green Tribunal, the president of the NGT Bar, which is basically the association of advocates who practice at the NGT. So it's a very prestigious position. And he has been one of the advocates who was very active in the initial years where NGT was establishing itself as a environmental court. So I was very lucky to get an internship under him, and I feel like it really opened my mind to the various possibilities of environmental law. And the what really captivated me is how real my work felt, when I was working with corporate offices, when I was working in constitutional courts, it felt like there was a lot of talk happening without really anything substantial that I was doing. Even if it was for a big corporate client, what was I ultimately doing? I was trying to make them some more money, or trying to help them secure their assets, or trying to help reduce their liability. I felt that that's okay. I'm not saying that there isn't a place for that in the world, but for me as a lawyer with this particular law degree, how can I use it to its maximum potential? I think nothing, no other work made as much sense as my internship with Advocate Sarode. And I remember on the first day itself, just being completely captivated by the work and what the possibilities of it were. I mean, working to protect forest and rivers and seas and our coasts is such important work. And just the thought of being able to do that filled me with such joy and with such hope that I never looked back. So it was in one moment. It was many years leading up to perhaps that one internship which really changed things for me.
And it is great to hear. And yes, internships are very formative in early career. And yes, for environmental law, yeah, I would think that interning at a National Green Tribunal, which looks after so many pressing environment issues, but
Hmm.
it's a specific and important role in environment litigation. And you working there surely must
Yeah,
have inspired you to take up this career. So that was an interesting story.
absolutely.
So you have worked on cases from different fields of environment, like illegal mining, river conservation, infrastructure projects. So in all these cases which you what were the most challenging cases in your career so far, and what did they teach you?
So I mean, see, initially, I think every case is very challenging because you just are figuring out how to do any of this. So yeah, I guess there were many cases at the start of my career which I found quite challenging, because law school will teach you many things, but it won't teach you how to be a lawyer, in the sense that it will teach you the theory of the field or the discipline, but the practice of it is something that you will only learn on the first day of the job, which is something that's regrettable, but it's the reality of the system that we live in. So there's a story that I often tell, which a senior of mine from college told me. And she was a brilliant student who went to uh, Harvard and then Oxford after she graduated from our law college. And she got this. She did a PhD from Oxford or something like that. And she comes back to Delhi and she's practicing in the Supreme Court. And some person comes to her and asks her, "Ki, she hasn't started practice. She's just come back from Oxford, okay? And she's now, but people know she's a lawyer. Someone comes to her and asks her that, madam, how much is the stamp duty to file this affidavit in court?" And she says, "I don't know what is the stamp duty. You'll find out somewhere." And he says that, "Arey, madam, you went all the way to Oxford and you don't know this simple question." So, that really highlights the difference between a theoretical knowledge and a practical knowledge. So, to answer your question, the initial stages are very difficult for any young lawyer, because the practical knowledge is something that very few colleges, try to teach properly, and even they might not succeed entirely. So the initial stages were difficult, but specifically, if I have to point to a couple of cases, I feel that appeals, which are basically where you're challenging a particular project by in its entirety, those are very tricky, because you have to go into the technicalities of the project. So I'll give you an example. There was a big copper refinery that we were challenging, and in order to do that, you have to understand how a copper refinery works, which is not as easy as one would think, because there are many processes involved. So challenging that this copper refinery shouldn't be here in this particular location means that you have to not only understand that location, the sensitivity of the forests or the ecosystems there, but how the processes involved in the copper refinery will lead to detrimental impacts to the environment that's around it. You understand? So for that, you need to know what is happening in the copper refinery. To know what's happening in the refinery, you have to understand the machines involved to at least some basic extent, and then you have to see, okay, how was this particular project assessed? And we'll talk about the EI notification also. But basically, there has to be an environmental impact assessment for any project. That that environmental impact assessment basically sees all the relevant aspects of the project, how it's going to impact the water around it, how it's going to impact the air around it, how is the project going to impact the forest around it. All of these things get assessed for any project that you want to build. So now for a copper refinery, you have to understand the system to then be able to see that, okay, this EI report, something is not working. The assessment that has been done is might not be appropriate because this particular effluent that gets discharged in this particular process of a copper refinery will actually have this particular impact, whereas what is mentioned in the report is something else. So you have to become a scientist in some sense when you're challenging these projects. Same thing happened in the riverfront development project, again a case that we'll talk about. It's a huge infrastructure project, so there are various civil engineering aspects involved in it. Now you have to understand them to a great extent. You have to understand how to read cross sectional maps. You have to understand how to see if how can you study tables of species lists to see whether any kind of what can you say, manipulation of data has happened there. So you have to be competent in biology to an extent. You have to be competent in civil engineering to an extent. You have to have basic scientific knowledge. You have to understand how machines work. You have to understand how to study data. So all of these things, the technical aspects are very real when there are big projects involved. So the big projects have always been the most challenging, and they always get the best lawyers to represent them also. So in that the future defense that you try to put forth, or the whatever the back and forth that happens with the other side, that also gets challenging when big projects are involved, because the best lawyers come up against you. So you have to be on your A game, and combine that with the technical expertise that you have to develop. They make for very challenging cases.
Yeah, definitely. And yes, I would also suppose that maybe lawyers might also need actually the help of engineers and scientists who are well versed to actually collaborate and find out how these projects work and what are the actual impacts. But yes, some basic knowledge of science will need to be taken up by the any lawyer working on these cases. So yeah, it does seem to be not really very easy, but but I think with more collaboration, these kind of cases can be handled well. And yeah, I can see why they can be challenging. Also because of the scale of the projects with respect to area and the different processes they use.
No, you're absolutely right. Collaboration is a very essential part, especially of the kind of law that I practice. And we do collaborate with many specific technical experts. But see, they can also only explain something to you. You will have to understand it, because you have to go to court and tomorrow justify that before a judge. So unless you have understood it at a fundamental level, you can't just go and read what the engineer would have written down on a piece of paper and go and repeat that before a judge. That's not how it will work, because the other side will be smarter than that. So you have to really know what you're talking about, and that knowing what you're talking about will only come when you have truly understood the subject. But you're right. I will rely on experts, and I have relied on architects, on engineers, on various kinds of scientists, biologists. All of this has happened with the help of people, and will continue to do so.
Yes, and it is infrastructure is nowadays a big issue affecting the environment. And somewhat added to this is the fact that you have actually successfully won cases in Pune, especially, and that's where we are based. Especially cases regarding loud noise in Ganesh festival, and also penalizing mining companies for damage to land and water sources in Pune. So we wanted to ask, how did this experience help you, and also What were the highlights of these cases which you fought so far?
I mean, personally, there have been many. Actually, I've been very lucky that I've worked with some very good people. So we've had some various successes at my previous job, where I was working with an organization called Legal Initiative for Forest and Environment. They are a very well-known Indian law firm. In fact, they won the Right Livelihood Award back when I happened to be at the job, actually. So it was quite incredible what they have managed to do independently. But together, with me at that job, we were able to get lots of good orders, as you mentioned, orders against illegal mining, compensation for victims. We were able to get the first of its one of its kind order, where we managed to get the government to frame some guidelines for decommissioning of thermal power plants. When a thermal power plant is run its life cycle, usually what would happen was all of that hazardous material would just be left in that area to pollute the area for forever. But because of our intervention, the government framed certain rules as to what should be done once a thermal power plant is decommissioned, and how can you remediate the entire area and protect the environment. So there were orders like that also. So not just a restoration or a prevention, but also trying to create policy level change. And that's the kind of thing that I've taken forward in my independent practice now for the past 3 years. And yeah, again, we were able to get some very good orders. We've got orders where, again, one of its kind order was passed directing the government to frame regulations on light pollution. They're still developing those regulations, but the fact that an order was passed in India talking about light pollution, it's unprecedented. It hasn't happened before in the country, and ours was the first of its kind case that kind of has led to that. I mean, it's a slow process because government takes time to move, but it's a big step forward. We again, and as you mentioned, the Ganpati noise case, it was very important for Pune to really lead the way in this, because Ganesh festival is pretty much, at least the way it's celebrated now, it's birthed in this city. So for Pune to lead the way, for the National Green Tribunal to pass a very good order, which has now sort of led the way for many other cities to follow. And we're seeing the same thing being reciprocated, or, the same thoughts being mirrored by our Chief Minister, who has also very recently spoken up about loudspeakers in religious processions and ceremonies and, places. So the Ganpati festival order was very important, because what it did was, again, a first of its kind order, where real time noise monitoring was ordered, which is something that has not happened in the history of this country. Real time, the government was mandated to monitor the noise, which is, I think, a huge step, because people have direct data at that point. You see that, okay, this is a particular loudspeaker, it's crossing 90 decibels, and I can see that. And that evidence is very difficult usually to catch with noise pollution, because there's so many sources of noise. It happens instantly and then it's gone. So we managed to increase the number of noise monitoring stations, which was around 15 before our case, to over 280. So from 15 noise monitoring stations to over 280 all over the city. It's a big jump. We managed to get regulation on the number of speakers and the kind of speaker also. So those who are familiar in these parts will know that how there would be essentially a loudspeaker wall that would come up, many loudspeakers stacked on upon each other, and nobody really needs this much noise. So we were able to get regulation against that. And even if you need it, it's against the law. So I don't even care if you need it or you don't need it. It's against the law. So it should not really be allowed to happen. So we got that order. There are other various orders we've got to protect trees. In fact, the very first case that I fought in life, just it I filed it in 2020. The result just came out, and we were able to get the government to plant 39,000 trees across NH66, which is National Highway 66 stretch near Sangamner. So they had to do compensatory plantation for the trees they cut to build that highway. That was not done for the past 5 years. So luckily, the courts have ordered that 39,000 trees should be planted, and they are being in process of being planted. So there are various good orders, various successes, and each unique in its own way. Some regulations, some restoration. There are mining orders where crores have been ordered as fine for mining companies. So there's that. There's prevention that's happened. There's restoration. There's policy across all levels. I think all of these have been, very nice victories that couldn't have been possible without, people working towards it. And I think, yeah, now it's just the start. More and more people are growing aware of environment and environmental law, and I only see my practice getting stronger. So hopefully next time we do this podcast, I'll have more highlights to tell you.
So these are actually very incredible, very much incredible news, because usually we hear so many not so good like happenings regarding to laws, like trees getting cleared, areas getting damaged due to projects. But on the other hand, these orders do leave us with some hope. And the light pollution thing is interesting, because actually, even if you look from, I'm a more from ecology background, so even from the research perspective and conservation perspective, like water pollution and air pollution, these things have received attention, but light pollution still remains actually a bit undercovered. So
Yeah,
it is actually encouraging that light pollution has received some kind of legal context, and it does seriously affect, especially activity and behavior of nocturnal birds, and especially bats. Important thing that this came out. Yeah.
I'm very happy to hear you say that. Because yes, you're right. Light pollution doesn't get taken seriously at all, which is very sad. But it should be, and I'm glad to hear you have such positive thoughts on it.
Yeah. So you were talking before about some issues in Pune, and as I also hinted before, the Muramutha Riverfront Development Project in Pune is a recent news and a very controversial project, which is really changing irreversibly the state of the rivers. But we wanted to know from the legal perspective, what are the main issues surrounding this project, environmental perspective about this project?
See, there's a couple of main key issues. Primarily, the impact of the project on flooding is something that it was not adequately assessed or taken into consideration by the authorities, and even uh, this was in fact something that was established even before the judiciary. Even the NGT took cognizance of and even accepted this fact that there were aspects of flooding which were not really taken into consideration. So primarily, this it's a very simple concept. I mean, just think of a straw. Okay, now in a straw, if you cover one the entire inside of the straw, you cover with sand, and you just leave a little bit a slight hole in it for the water to pass. There's going to be not as much water which could pass. Now, you take out all the sand and a lot more water will pass. Correct, anyone can think so, anyone can understand this basic philosophy. That's the same thing. That's what's happening to our river. You constrict the area that is previously used for the river to flow. What will happen? The water will come out, the water will spread out. It's the same thing. Think of an artery. An artery gets choked. What happened? There isn't water, there isn't space for the blood to flow, right? So but now, of course, the difference between an artery and a river is there is space for the water to flow, and that's what will happen. It will spread all over, it will flow all over, and that's what will cause flooding. We saw that in Pune last year in 2024. There was a rainfall which was not in any way abnormal or freak or something like that. It was very much within the sort of range of expected rainfall. But In fact, only after the release of 35,000 cusecs of water from Khadakwasla River, Pune saw quite heavy flooding. Now, this 35,000 cusecs is really meant to be double its amount. It really should be 70,000 cusecs should be causing this much flooding. Even in fact, 70,000 shouldn't be. If it crosses that number, then you would are likely to see some flooding. But until that level, there should be no flooding. The fact that half of that level is only reached and there is flooding means that the river, the length, think about it, the total area that the river has is getting slowly reduced. If that happens, the water will come up and it will flow to the side. That has always been the main issue with the RFD project, that you are constricting the river's flow. The natural meanders that are formed, you are hardening them and concretizing them, which takes away the ability of the river to flow naturally. Then you are constructing these barrages within them, which is going to again prevent the natural flow, stagnating the water. And this stagnating water is a big problem because of the total sewage that that gets released into the river untreated every day. By all
Yes.
estimates, it's around 800 to 1000 MLD, million liters per day, untreated sewage. So one other problem was that the RFD kept claiming to be helping in sewage, but none of the 5,000 crores that are really going to be spent are to treat sewage. So how will the RFD help in treat sewage is something that we still don't really have an answer to. The government says that they will use some other project, the funds that they're getting from some other project, and at the same time that they're constructing the RFD, they'll also construct this. I'm saying, okay, that's well and good, but why does the RFD have to be there for that project to be here? It's not necessary. You solve the problem of sewage first. Every day, if roughly 80,000 tanks or tankers, those big water tankers that come every day to give water to a lot of Pune, think about 80,000 of them every day releasing untreated sewage, domestic waste, yours and mine, into the river every single day for past I don't know how many years. 80,000 tanks. It's a huge quantity of sewage and we're seeing the impact of that with GBS and other diseases in Pune. So the
Yes.
RFD issue was mainly, firstly, that is going to impact flooding, that you are claiming to be helping in sewage, but there's not one provision you have made for sewage.
So
So
even
when
the EIA didn't have as much analysis or consideration of flooding and sewer treatment both. Is it?
Yes, absolutely right. It had zero consideration of sewage treatment because that's not a part of this project. It had briefly mentioned flooding, but no, not at all scientifically rigorous. And in fact, we managed to give various counter documents also, which are government sanctified and sanctioned, which prove that flooding is going to become an issue. So all of these things were there. There's also the impact to the riverine ecology because you're creating concrete where
Yes.
there was soil before. So these are some major issues, and the fact that 5,000 crores of in citizens money is going to be involved in this, where they are not entirely convinced of the project or its safety or the impact is going to have on the riverine ecology. So these are some serious issues that the government really needed to resolve before just steamrolling and going ahead with this project come what may. And I am very disappointed with the court order also, in fact, that came. I must say, as a lawyer, I am very disappointed because the judiciary has really said that, see, there are problems in this project and there are legal issues that needed to be solved, but because it's a public issue project, public purpose project, it should be allowed. I mean, if that's the standard, then the laws are meaningless. Then the government tomorrow just has to say that this is a public purpose project, and all laws basically stand nullified by that. What's the point? And I'm very disappointed with the order. But of course, one good thing of the order was that now 18 additional protective conditions have been imposed on the construction of RFD, which I feel do help a lot in mitigating all of these concerns that I have mentioned. So it was a big victory in one sense, but it's as a see, you're winning, but you're winning indirectly. The project is still happening, but now they are taking into consideration all of the things they should have taken beforehand. So, but that doesn't sit right. But it is a somewhat of a victory in a sense, and public citizens pressure continues, has to be on them. So I think these are really the main issues of RFD. I can go in more detail on any point if you'd like, but yeah, overall, this is the an overview. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, I am also part of this Pune River Revive movement, which does a big which does a big citizens initiative for demanding a clean river.
Yeah.
And yeah, the main aim I think should be first, as you said, cleaning. And it's not like the concrete based and all these embankment based development project is the only option. There is a much better option for natural restoration of river, but unfortunately that has not been carried forward by the proponents.
Yeah.
Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah, like if they are decided to continue it instead of looking at the alternative, then at least yes, they should have these new considerations in place, changing the architecture to accommodate flooding definitely. So yeah, that is a
Absolutely.
one of the concerns. So you didn't mention mining being a big problem in Western Ghats, especially. I read so much news in Karnataka about this illegal mining in the Western Ghats. Do remember one of the most eminent ecologists, Dr. Madhav Gadge, who was involved in demanding the Western Ghats to be declared eco-sensitive zones. But today, I think all these notifications have not been followed, or at least some of them have not been followed, and illegal mining currently remains a big issue in protected areas like Western Ghat. So now, currently, how has legal action helped in this in regulating this issue, and what challenges remain?
See, so I mean, the Western Ghats are also quite a massive ecosystem in the sense that it's around 1.5 lakh square kilometers, 1,500 mile long, 1,500 kilometer long stretch. So it's a big area. So
Yes.
Western Ghats per se, I mean, I, instead of giving you a blanket answer, I'd like to specifically focus on the impact that Goa Foundation has had in controlling illegal mining in Goa, because it's a very crucial sort of legal victory that they had fought and won. And across many years they had to fight this, and it had some serious, I would say, path-breaking landmark impacts. So to begin with, in 2012, the Goa Foundation had filed a case with the Supreme Court, and basically showing that there had been illegal mining worth 35,000 crores that had happened. And this got, the government, the judiciary to really take a serious look on the entire aspect of mining in Goa, which had been happening for the past 40 years before that. So, or maybe even before that in some places. So the government and the court took a very strict view that this has, because Goa Foundation did such a good job, the court was convinced that this cannot be allowed to go ahead, and they banned mining in the state. Can you imagine? Matlab, a
Oh, that
blanket
is a
ban.
definitely a
Yeah,
huge decision.
it's a huge thing. To get a blanket ban on mining is very, and I don't know how many more of those we'll ever have in this country. So it's a really a revolutionary thing that they managed to do. And of course, whenever a good order you get, you can expect pushback in some of the other way. So some of the other way was found by the people who wanted to do mining. The government also, ultimately sort of bowed down to some pressure, and again they allowed mining. Again the Goa Foundation went to the court. Again they showed that these things were happening. Again the court struck down all. Then in fact, the second time, the court struck down all mining leases from 2007 that had been issued. So again, very powerful steps being taken by the Supreme Court, unprecedented in the country's history, and hugely impactful. It changed the way mining leases are allotted. An auction system was bought. Of course, that's also not a perfect system, but it was a step up from what was previously there. They established this permanent fund for the basically one portion of the mining proceeds have to go into this permanent fund, which is to be used for future generations. Can you imagine? I mean, we don't have such a fund in the state. And again, solely a creation of this Supreme Court matter that was fought by Goa Foundation. So that happened. And again, they had to go back to court a few years later. And again, they went in 2018. And they fought there also. Again, the court imposed a second ban on mining in 2018. So
Quite a long story, it seems. And
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. So
yeah, doing ban, I think maybe because it is also smaller state, and maybe it was possible for them. But at least, yeah, some good news in this scenario. But a
yeah,
lot more needs to be done. Yeah.
very much, very much. The fact that it was Goa, the fact that Goa is the way it is, and it has such a natural history and a natural beauty, were all factors. And yeah, that's really, I think, one of the major sort of countrywide wins against illegal mining, which has protected a great deal of Goa, a state we know to be so beautiful, because of this legal intervention. So very impactful.
Yes, yes, it has amazing wildlife. I have been there. So
Yeah,
let's go to the next questions quickly. So
yeah,
yeah, you did mention how getting environmental permits, EI assessments done and approved is getting bit easier nowadays under the current regime for
mm,
big industrial projects. So, as a lawyer, what do you think needs to happen legally for making these EIA rules more strict for projects to get clearance, and
yeah.
also any on-ground measures which need to be implemented
See,
to make it?
first and foremost, the government needs to stop diluting the AI law. I mean, that at every step they have done that, and they'll continue to do that, it seems like. So, they make it, they change the criteria for, so imagine on day one, if you have a industry which is 20,000 square meters wide, producing 10 MLD worth of sewage, you have to get a EIA done. That law was changed and made to 1 lakh square meters and 10,000 MLD. So immediately a huge bunch of industries are taken away from the purview.
It's a
So that,
loophole. Like smaller industries, they can now pollute
yeah,
without
because
any
the threshold
consent.
has only been increased. The level at which you now require a EI has gotten much higher. So all the people at the lower end immediately get away. So that's one thing. The second thing that needs to be done is, so primarily stop diluting the law. That's one. Second thing is, you cannot have EIA reports made by the people who are applying for the permissions themselves. It defeats the purpose. It's like saying, I will prepare my own report card and give it to you, and you sign off on it. Going, you
It
spend,
should be some
it has to be.
independent environmental.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You need to stop, and then it basically becomes a question of who can create the best report, which kind of is on my side. So agencies also start marketing themselves like that, as opposed to being who is the most scientifically rigorous agency. That's really the person who should be doing this, but that's not the person who gets the contract. The person who gets the contract is who's most friendly to the project proponent. So that is again a major issue, that the EI cannot be done by the person who's applying for the permission itself. That needs to be changed. And the third thing I would say is that there are various conditions in EIA, in the EI notification or in the environmental clearance that are granted after EIA is done. Those are hardly ever monitored by the government. So post EIA enforcement is again something that remains a huge challenge. In fact, I can guarantee it that there will not be a single project across this country which can show 100% EC compliance. At least a government project. It's just impossible. Maybe one or some construction building private somewhere might have done, but on the whole, any project of size, there will definitely be EC violations. So my point is that if monitoring, post clearance monitoring is strengthened by the government, that will also go a huge way, because a lot of the conditions that are there in the environmental clearance are things like plant trees, or ensure that water is not groundwater is not polluted, or air pollution is not happening, or noise is not, or these are things like that, to make sure that the project is not very environmentally polluting. So who is seeing that it's not environmentally polluting once the permission has been got? That needs to be done by the government. That monitoring is not done at the level at which it should be. And I think that's because environment is still not as high a list, or as high on the list of priorities of the public. So the government does not also prioritize it too much. Tomorrow we start collectively demanding for better environmental monitoring, and I think the government will follow. So I think these three are the main issues with the EIA.
Yeah, that's a very good summary of the issues. And yes, I did read recently that the laws were diluted, and that did actually cause a lot of outrage, especially amongst like scientists and environmentalists. So definitely that is an issue. Now we will come to another aspect. Is that we will come to another aspect of environmental law, which is actually public awareness about environmental law. So, what do you think needs to happen to allow more public engagement and more awareness of environmental law, so that even citizens can use this law for fighting cases and ensuring conservation of different ecosystems, then air, water, and soil in the local areas where the people live?
Yeah, see, I think we are slowly feeling the impacts of pollution, of climate change, of unsustainable development. So I think when the impact is felt, people will want to do something about it. Until the impact is felt, there'll always be something that is more important. See, I don't think there is anyone out there who voluntarily wants to destroy or damage the environment. Even the biggest industrialists, they'll go to holiday, so they'll go to some wildlife safari, or they'll go by some beach resort or something. So they also want to be by nature. Even the fanciest and the richest amongst us, who themselves will do a polluting job, run an industry which is polluting, but when they want a good time, they go by environment, they go by nature, because we came from nature and ultimately we are nature. So I don't think there is anyone who dislikes the environment, who doesn't want to protect it. We all want to do that. It's just not as high on our priority list
Yeah,
because
it's
we
more
think,
about priorities.
huh,
Yeah,
we think there's
people.
things that are more important. So I feel that the more pollution hits us, the more climate change hits us, we will start seeing that, okay, something is not right. And I think even if this doesn't happen, just living outside of nature creates a different kind of personality. It creates different kind of mental health. It creates different kind of physical health. And you go in nature and suddenly you feel alive. You feel so good. You're like, wow, I should do this every day. Rose, her Sunday, let's do this. We'll go on a trek. What all of those things happen once you spend some time in nature. So, what can people do? I think just spend time in nature. You'll feel better about it. You'll feel better about yourself, and you'll be more interested in protecting it. Like, why did 5,000 people in April 2023 walk in the middle of on a rainy Tuesday to save Vetal Tekdi in Pune? It's because they go on Vetal Tekdi. It's because they walk there. They have meetings there. They have parties there. They chill out with their friends there. They go in the morning for exercise. It's their life with our degree. That's why they want to protect it. So then people will find out, oh, this is a law I can use. We can file a case here. Oh, we can do this here. We can go to that person who's in charge, who's the corporator, who's the MLA, who's the MP, who's the minister, who can we. So all of those things happen once there is a vested interest in protecting nature. Vested interest happens in protecting nature once you experience the joy of being in nature. So that I will say, don't, it's not as important to read up on laws or policy. That can be done very quickly. To form an interest in the environment, to care for the environment takes more time. So I would say, just if to anyone listening to this who wants to be more involved in this, just spend more time. And to people who like us, who care about and want people to be involved, our job should be to take people to nature. So have meetings in the wild, inside whatever the wild is in your area. It could be a garden, it could be a park, it could be the tekdi, it could be anything by the lake. Go there, spend time with your friends there. Get more people involved. That's the only way we solve this problem. It's not a problem of learning the laws, because that can be done very quickly, and you don't even have to learn. You just find a lawyer like me. I do this my whole life, so I know the laws. I'll tell you the laws, but you come to me with some interest. You come to me that, oh, I really want to do something, and things happen only with that. So that desire, if it's there, then everything follows.
Yeah, that is actually a very profound message. And Yes, I think even in my own experience, when you actually visit all the natural spots to offer, you do build a connection, and yes, that connection is important in actually uh, people getting together to protect the that spot or that region. And yes, then interest can go into legal protection and those things, but that initial connection is definitely important, and that can only be produced by actually visiting natural places, definitely.
Yeah.
So I think you covered this in the previous question also, but any other advice you would like to give to our nature interested audience, or any budding students who are lawyers but want to go into environmental law, about entering into this field of
Mm.
environmental law?
See, I would, if anyone is interested in entering this field, I would say, uh, I mean, see, more than anyone who's interested in this field, if you're wondering, is this field for me? I want to target those people, because those who are interested will anyway come. Those who are little on the fence, no, I want to talk to you. So if you are someone who is not sure that, okay, is environmental law for me? What is the future? Let me just tell you one thing. I feel environmental law as a profession right now is at it's at its think of like how Bitcoin was in 2010. A few people had heard about it, but nobody was taking it seriously yet. That's really how environmental law is today. In 10 years, the role that environmental law will play is going to be mammoth. Mark my words, because we are undoubtedly going to feel the impacts of climate change and pollution. We are feeling it already. In 10 years, it's going to become unavoidable, it's going to become daily, it's going, or at least regular, and we will feel that something has to be done. And that's where an environmental law will come in. Environmental lawyer will come in. So the what will an environmental lawyer look like will also change, in the sense that there are so many allied, or so many different streams within environmental law. There is the kind of work that I do, but even beyond me, there is ESG, which is an entire field that has developed. There is international environmental law, which is another field that is emerging. There are so many. There's like green financing, which is an issue that's coming about. Green bonds and whatnot. There is renewable energy and that whole sector, and energy transitioning. So there are the biggest questions of tomorrow are all revolving around environment. You look at agriculture, you look at climate change, you look at pollution, and you look at renewable energy. These are all essentially, other than perhaps tech, but even tech has an environmental cost, and which is going to become a thing for important thing for tech companies, because tomorrow, you can't be seen as someone who is environmentally polluting as an industry. If you're running a company, you want to be seen as pro environment. So even for them, it's going to be a huge issue. So environment is going to be a huge issue. Law is everywhere, which means a natural corollary to that is that environmental law will be everywhere. So if you're wondering कि मेरे लिए क्या future है, just think back to that person in 2010 who was just about to invest in Bitcoin or not. You know, it took him about 8-10 years to make his money back, and people laughed at him perhaps for doing that, where he could have used that money to invest in some kind of mutual fund or bought gold with it or put it in an FD or something. But he didn't. He gambled on Bitcoin, and it paid off. I really think if you're looking at strictly from a commercial point, this is a bet you should make, because in 10 years it's going to pay off heavily. We will need people with individual expertise. We will need people who understand the system and the problems and how to solve them. And the demand for that will be significantly high. It's only going to increase. So, from a commercial mind, that's the advice I would give you, that there is a serious potential here. From an ecological perspective, I would say that this is the most important thing to do. I mean, our future depends on it. Not only our future, our present depends on it too. So if you are like me and you think from your heart and you're passionate, then don't worry, the money will come. I've managed to have an independent practice for the past 3 years. I've been an environmental lawyer almost 6 years now. So I managed to do it, and I live very fairly comfortably. So it can be done, and it's the rewards are fantastic, because to hold a tree that you have helped saved is nothing like it. I think I understand how somewhat what doctors might feel like, to help a patient live a little longer, to help a tree live a little longer, is there's nothing like it. So that feeling is really worth dedicating your life to. If it makes sense to you, come work with me or with people who are doing this kind of work. If you're still on the fence, I think there are serious commercial reasons for why you should do this as well. And if this is not for you, you're not a lawyer, you're not an environmentalist, I would just give you one piece of advice, that just remember that every act you take is an ecological act. Every step you make is an ecological step. We live in nature, we do not live outside of it. We are very much nature. Tomorrow, this conversation you're hearing is powered by electricity, in a sense. You are sitting on a chair that was made from wood. You're wearing clothes that were made from cotton, which was grown in a field somewhere, which required water, soil, manure, fertilizers, the sun. Everything you have done and everything you will continue to do will shape the environment and the ecology around you. So just be cautious and cognizant of this fact, because if you're cautious and cognizant of this fact, you will take the appropriate steps. So other than that, there's no real piece of advice that I could give you. I would just wish everyone the best. And yeah, I think definitely I would like to thank uh, this particular podcast, People of Nature podcast, for inviting me on. It's been a wonderful uh, time here, and I hope that you have many more such conversations with many more people, and many more such podcasts also come about. So thank you for doing the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Maitreya. You actually use your own legal expertise to build a very solid argument for environmental law as a career. And yes, environment, I think, is the field of tomorrow. It is going to affect each and every one of us, both positively and negatively. So, definitely, more public interest is needed. And yes, environmental law is one of the many ways in which people can contribute to the environment. And this is one of the domains where actually you can see the effects on the ground on conservation. So,
Yeah,
this is very important field. So, thank you, Maitreya. Very interesting podcast. And
thank you. Thank you, sir.
thank you for your insights.
Yeah, thank you. Please, I'd love to have many more such conversations, so hopefully we can do that soon.
Yes, yes, it was a great talk. Yeah.
Thank you.